Lawmakers were given some homework this weekend, 923 pages to read on the Kerry-Boxer bill after Senator Boxer's office released the chairman's mark of the bill late Friday night. This draft puts into place what many observers have been waiting for, how emissions allowances will be split among industries and utilities. Hearings begin this week on the bill. We have analysis of the bill from both Dan Goldstein and the latest on an EPA analysis of the bill from Margaret Ryan. We're going to start with Dan. So Dan, from your reading, what do you think is the biggest difference between this version and Waxman-Markey? Very similar.
Well, actually, the interesting thing is that for as much as they may be different, there are quite a few similarities, and that's why the EPA analysis on the cost is very similar to Waxman-Markey, and you're going to hear a lot of that from Executive Editor Margaret Ryan coming up after me. But there are some key differences, and here are some of them. The energy-intensive industries, and those are like the Alcoas of the world that depend on electricity for a lot of their manufacturing, oil refineries, heavy manufacturing industries, they get a bigger slice of the allocation allowances, and that's very good news for them, at least how they see it. There's also going to be more help for carbon capture and sequestration. That's probably good news for coal-fired power plants or companies that have a lot of coal-fired power plants. And then there's also going to be higher rebates for consumers than what is in the House bill, and that's going to be one of the key things that you're going to hear about in the EPA, because that, at least from the EPA's point of view, helps keep the cost down for consumers. The other thing that's probably other key is also there's more allowances for what they call a market stabilization fund. And we've been hearing a lot about that because of the concerns about the price collar. That's the trade side of the cap and trade, and whether those companies basically are going to see the price of carbon skyrocket. And the way they're doing that is basically saying we're going to just take more allowances from the out years. And the problem is that, as we've heard about it, that's akin to a payday loan. Now let's look at how the allowances break down. 35% go to electric utilities, as you might expect. They're going to be the biggest hit by this bill, so they get the biggest get-out-of-jail-free cards, as it were. 15% of the allowances go to low to moderate income households. The real question is, what defines a low-income household? What defines a moderate household? We're going to find out more about that. 10% go to renewable energy investments. Clean cars also get about 3%. That's not included in there. That's a separate one. 10% go to deficit reduction. That's probably the biggest change between this bill and Waxman-Markey. That increases to 25% between 2040 and 2050. Natural gas consumers also get a break so that there's not going to be a spike in natural gas. At least that's the way the advocates of the bill want to see it. And 6%, almost 7%, go to consumer rebates, and that's a big element in the EPA's analysis, that they said this is not going to cost more consumers more than a postage stamp a day. So it's those those rebates from basically from the government to the electricity companies that are key to getting those consumer rebates. Now, 2%, this is a big item, 2% the market reserve, and that's increased from Waxman-Markey, and that goes back to the criticism that we've heard, basically that carbon prices are going to go skyrocket as trading goes live, so they're holding back more of those analysis. You know, so bottom line, Susan, there's a lot of questions in this bill, but there's not enough time, not a lot of time to read it. At least that's how the Republicans are looking at it.
So, Dan, Republicans on the committee, I guess, aren't too happy. This bill was dropped so late on Friday. That's
right, and a lot of people are doing the complaining too, and they're not happy, especially with the EPA analysis, and you'll hear from Margaret about that. But they may use, and this is what the Republicans at least are telling the Washington Post, they may use a parliamentary maneuver to basically hold up the markup of the bill. Now the committee, the EPW Committee, Environment and Public Works, has to have 2 Republicans on it to consider legislation, and they just simply may not show up, according to the Washington Post, which would not allow Senator Boxer to move the bill forward. And as Senator James Inhofe told the Washington Post, quote, "We're not being unreasonable. The only leverage we have is the quorum, and if we get stonewalled, we'll use it." Susan?
Wow. Okay. Dan Goldstein, we're waiting to hear what happens there.